John stood at the edge of the docking bay and watched the stars drift by as the last shuttle pulled away. He had spent most of his life fixing ships and engines. He knew the hum of a reactor like he knew the sound of his own heart. Tonight, the air smelled of ionized metal and distant rain. A faint signal tapped at the back of his mind, but he ignored it. He had learned long ago not to follow messages with no clear origin. Years ago, John found himself on a lonely outpost near the frontier. He had answered a distress call that led him to a damaged vessel. The hull was torn and the lights were dim. Inside, he found Selene. She lay hidden in the shadows, her body pale and fragile under the cold glow of emergency lamps. Her eyes glowed with a faint violet light, and she looked human in every way except for the pattern on her wrist. John worked through the night to patch leaks and reroute power. He used every tool he had learned to use in his long hours on Earth. Selene watched him without speaking. She seemed tired and weary. John felt a strange pull in his chest. He did not know what she was, but he knew she was in danger. He could not leave her to die in that silent ship. When the systems began to stabilize, Selene sat up for the first time. Her muscles flexed like water flowing over rocks. She placed a single hand on John's shoulder and spoke in a voice soft as silk. She said thank you, but her words carried an echo of something older than any star. John did not understand her language, so he nodded. He pointed to the exit and made a gesture like carrying a weight off her shoulders. He gave her water and a packet of food he carried for long trips. She tasted it, her eyes widening in surprise. She offered him a small token in return. It was a smooth stone that shimmered like moonlight on water. John accepted it, slipping the stone into his pocket. He felt a warmth spread through his hand, but he did not know why. Before dawn, the patrol ships came. They scanned the ship and demanded to know John's cargo. He did not answer. He stepped between them in the doorway, blocking their path. He lied and said the ship was empty. They threatened to seize his license and fine him for smuggling. He took a deep breath and pressed his luck. He told them he would have to check his manifest. In the confusion, Selene slipped out. She moved. Like a shadow, silent and swift. John heard the hatch seal behind her as she left the ship. He dared not chase her. He felt panic rise inside him. He stumbled after the patrol captain, arguing and waving his hands. When he turned back, the docking bay was empty. Selene was gone. Over the next days, John searched the logs. He looked for any sign of her passage through the station. He found nothing. It was as if the ship had never housed an alien creature. He told himself she was free and safe somewhere else. He returned to his life as a mechanic, refusing to think about her glowing eyes. At night, he held the stone in his hand. It fit perfectly in his palm. He felt a soft pulse of warmth whenever he pressed his thumb against its surface. He wondered if the stone was more than a token of gratitude. He kept it on his workbench, near the parts he used every day. It glowed faintly under the garage lights. He fixed a freighter engine that had lost power. He rebuilt a hovercar that burned through fuel too quickly. He helped the station chief find a leaky fuel line in the cold storage unit. Every task he performed felt ordinary. Yet each time he looked at the stone, he felt a memory he could not place. One night, he dreamed of a world bathed in violet light. He saw tall towers carved from crystal and rivers that flowed with glowing water. He felt laughter echoing through the air. A gentle voice called his name. He woke with the taste of salt in his mouth. He reached for the stone. It was warm. The next morning, a signal arrived on his private frequency. It was faint and scrambled. It repeated over and over, "Help." He did not know who sent it. The signal used no standard codes. John hesitated. He remembered Selene and the stone's warmth. He set his wrench down and tapped a reply. "Who is this?" Silence answered him. He felt a chill in the air. The station lights flickered. He glanced at the entrance. Nothing moved. John forced himself to take a breath. He packed a bag with spare parts and a bottle of water. He picked up the stone and slipped it into his pocket. He stepped into the corridor and walked toward the source of the signal. John had no idea what he would find. He only knew that something from his past had found its way back to him. The stars waited beyond the station windows, silent and cold. But John felt a spark of hope. He did not yet know how his life would change, but he was ready to answer the call. John paused in the dim corridor as the signal echoed through the metal walls. He shivered, but he did not turn back. He followed the sound to a small data port on the floor. The wires glowed faintly. He knelt and tapped a few commands into his handheld interface. The message scrolled, "Help me." John frowned and grabbed the datapad. He rose and went to his workshop. The workshop sat at the edge of the spaceport. The windows looked out on freighters docked like giant beasts sleeping. John crossed the floor to his workbench. He placed the datapad beside his tools and ran his fingers over the smooth stone. It felt warm. He sighed and leaned against the bench. He knew Selene had given him that stone. He wondered if she sent the signal. He wiped oil from his hands and reached for an engine mount. He worked in silence for a long time. Each bolt he tightened reminded him of the day he rescued Selene. He remembered the softness of her voice and the weight of her gaze. He told himself she was safe, she was free. John did not write messages. He did not ask questions. He let his days flow in simple tasks. He checked the fuel pump on a shuttle that would leave in 2 hours. He tested the pressure gauge and heard the hiss of air through the lines. He smiled. The work felt honest. Outside, the stars turned in the sky. People walked by in jumpsuits and uniforms. Some glanced at him, but most passed by without a second thought. He liked it that way. That night, he closed the workshop and walked to his small apartment. He lived alone. The apartment had a bed, a table, and a window that looked at the landing field. He placed the stone on the table next to a cup. He poured water and watched droplets slide down the glass. He checked the datapad. The message still glowed. "Help me." But there was no more text. He tapped reply. "Are you Selene?" The pad echoed his words, then stayed blank. He went to sleep with the pad on his chest. He dreamed of Selene. In his dream, he saw her in a field of violet grass. Her hair floated around her like water. She reached out and touched his cheek. Tears shone in her eyes. He heard her say, "Please." He woke with his heart pounding. John spent the next day in the market district. He walked among stalls selling food and spare parts. He bought bread and cheese. He filled his water bottle. A child laughed as a hovering drone dipped near her head. John watched the scene and felt a gentle warmth. He liked the small joys of Earth. On his way back to the workshop, John paused by a holo ad for interstellar travel. It showed planets with rings and moons that glowed. He thought of Selene's world. He wondered if she watched him now. Did she see him walk these streets? Did she feel the same pull he felt every time he looked at the stars? Back in the workshop, a small drone buzzed through the open door. It carried a tiny package. John caught it in midair. He set it on the bench. Inside, he found a letter and 2 small devices. The paper was thin and soft. The writing was neat in a language he could not read. He set the letter under a scanner. His hand hovered over a device that looked like a key. It glowed faintly when he held it. He scanned the letter. The words rearranged themselves on the datapad. The message read, "If you have this, trust the stone. I have watched over you on Earth. I have seen your kindness. I bring you a gift in thanks. Follow the key to find me." John's breath caught. The message ended. He pressed his palm against the table. The key glowed warm like the stone. He stood and looked out at the freighters. He thought about the gift. What could Selene offer? She had saved him once. Maybe she would show him her world. Maybe she would ask him to leave Earth. John placed the key and stone in his pocket. He grabbed his coat and headed for the docks. The docks lay at the far end of the station. Cargo crates lay stacked like block towers. A few workers moved boxes under bright lights. John walked among them, careful to keep the devices hidden. He reached the very end where a small shuttle waited. Its paint was chipped and faded. A sign on the door read, "Private Transport." He tapped the key against the hull. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the cabin was dark. John stepped in and closed the door. He saw a panel beside him. He pressed the key against a small reader. The panel lit up. A low hum filled the cabin. The shuttle's engines rumbled to life. John felt a thrill. The shuttle lifted and moved. Away from the station, John stared at the console. He saw a star chart appear. A single point blinked far from known lanes. He tapped the screen. The chart expanded. It showed a planet with violet oceans. Underneath, Cellini's name gleamed in a script he could not read. John's heart leapt. He touched the screen, and the shuttle adjusted its course. The journey would take hours. John sat back in his seat. He closed his eyes. He thought of Cellini's pale skin and her violet eyes. He smiled at the memory. He felt hope and fear mixed together. He did not know what he would find, but he trusted her. She had given him a stone long ago, and now this key. She believed he was worthy. Outside the windows, stars streaked by like rain. John watched the patterns form and fade. He placed his hand on his pocket, touching the stone and the key together. They pulsed in unison. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer. The shuttle glided through the darkness, carrying him toward a future he could not yet imagine. John woke from a restless sleep to the steady hum of the shuttle's engines. He opened his eyes and looked around the dark cabin. The violet star ahead had grown brighter. Through the window he could see a planet with swirling clouds of purple and silver. He felt his heart race. He touched the stone in his pocket. It warmed at his touch. The shuttle's computer chimed softly. A voice spoke in a gentle tone. "You have arrived at Cellini's world." John swallowed and stood. He moved to the airlock. The door slid open with a hiss. Outside, a narrow walkway led to a small station built into the rock. He stepped out and felt the air change. It was crisp and cool, with a hint of sweet scent. John followed the walkway to the station. Soft lights in the walls guided his path. He wondered how Cellini always knew where to send him. He remembered her eyes reflecting in the darkness when he first saw her. He tensed as he thought of what he would say when he saw her again. At the end of the corridor, a larger door stood, closed. It bore the same symbol as the stone he carried, 3 circles overlapping in a gentle curve. He pressed the stone against a reader. The door opened. John stepped through into a vast chamber. Light from a large window washed the floor in violet hues. Beyond the window lay a valley of crystal towers and glowing rivers. John stared in awe. He had never seen anything like it. He felt a weight in his chest. It was wonder and fear mixed together. A soft voice spoke behind him. "Welcome?" "John." He turned to see Cellini. She stood tall and graceful, her skin pale with a hint of violet. Her hair flowed like water around her shoulders. Her eyes shone brighter than any star. John felt his breath catch. He tried to speak, but no words came. Cellini smiled and stepped forward. She reached out and touched his arm. Her skin felt cool and smooth. He felt a calm wash over him. Cellini guided John toward a low platform at the center of the chamber. She sat and patted the floor next to her. John knelt. He watched as she lifted a thin sheet of crystal from a nearby stand. The crystal glowed with inner light. Cellini spoke in her soft voice. Her words came through the shuttle's translator in John's mind. She said she had brought him here to share her world and a gift for humanity. She held the crystal between her fingers. It pulsed like a heartbeat. John looked at the crystal. He saw shapes move inside it, tiny lights that formed patterns. Cellini explained that the crystal held the memory of 1,000 years of her people's history. It contained knowledge of healing, peace, and harmony with nature. She said her people had once been warriors, but they learned to live in balance. They transformed their world with the crystal's power. They healed wounds and grew forests in barren lands. She believed Earth could use this gift to end war and heal its wounds. John listened. He felt tears in his eyes. He thought of Earth's struggles, wars, pollution, hunger. He remembered the people he knew. He pictured his quiet life on the spaceport, fixing engines while the world suffered. Cellini's voice spoke again. "Will you help us share this gift with your people?" John took a deep breath. He felt the crystal's warmth through his fingers. He knew his choice could change everything. He nodded. He said he would try. Seleni's smile lit the room. She placed the crystal in his hand. He felt a surge of energy flow through him. The chamber's walls glowed brighter. Outside the window, the valley came alive. Rivers flowed faster and lights pulsed in the towers. John watched, amazed. Selena stood and moved to a console. She tapped a few controls. A holomap of Earth appeared in the air. She pointed to regions of conflict and pain. She said the crystal could heal those areas, but it needed a network of devices to channel its power. John knelt and examined the map. He saw cities scarred by war and lands torn by storms. He felt a burden on his shoulders. He looked up at Selene. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "I will guide you," she said. "I will be with you in spirit and in body." John nodded. He felt courage grow inside him. Selene led him through the chamber to a side room. Inside, machines hummed in a soft glow. She said these were the shapers. They could reproduce the crystal's power in smaller forms. They could be sent to Earth as seeds of change. John studied the machines. He saw a row of small vessels, each holding a fragment of the crystal. He realized these could be gifts for different nations and cultures. He felt hope. Selene explained the process. John would use his skills to calibrate the shapers and arrange the shipment to Earth. He would need to work with humans he could trust. She said she had prepared contacts and safe routes. John felt the weight of responsibility. He looked at Selene. She smiled. He said he would need time to prepare. Selene nodded and led him back to the main chamber. As they walked, she told him stories of her world, how they healed deserts, grew lakes, and ended conflicts with understanding. She spoke of the crystal's power to mend broken hearts and inspire peace. John listened and imagined Earth with no hunger, no war. He felt tears of joy. He squeezed Selene's hand. She stopped and looked into his eyes. She said she loved him. John's breath caught. He swallowed hard. He said he cared for her too, more than he had ever told anyone. Selene's eyes shone. She leaned forward and kissed him. The kiss felt like starlight. John felt warmth fill him. He closed his eyes and held her. Alarm bells sounded in the chamber. Red lights flashed. John and Selene stepped back. Selene tapped her communicator. A voice spoke urgently. "Cartel ships approaching." John's heart sank. He grabbed the crystal shard in his pocket. Selene spoke to the shuttle. "Emergency departure." John and Selene ran to the airlock. They placed the crystal fragment in a secure container. John tapped a code and sealed the door. The shuttle lifted off just as cartel vessels appeared above the valley. John watched the towers shrink below. Selene guided the shuttle toward open space. She said they would have to fight or hide. John placed a hand on her shoulder. She looked at him and nodded. John gripped the controls. He felt fear and determination. He thought of Earth and the gift he carried. He whispered, "We will protect this gift, Selene. For your people and for mine?" Selene smiled and took his hand. The shuttle jumped to hyperspace, leaving the violet world behind. John sat back and closed his eyes. He held the crystal shard close to his heart. He knew their journey had only just begun. John opened his eyes to the shuttle's dim interior. Only emergency lights glowed. Selene sat beside him, her eyes on the console. John rubbed his neck. He felt pain where he had curled against the wall during the jump. Selene reached over and touched his shoulder. He smiled and nodded. She said they were safe for now. Ahead, the main view screen showed stars stretching like lines across black space. John watched the lines blur as the shuttle moved faster than light. He tapped the secure container beside him. The crystal fragment pulsed softly within. He thought of Earth and the council he trusted. He hoped they were ready. Selene turned to John. She said the cartel would not give up easily. They knew the crystal's power and would stop at nothing to seize it. John frowned. He said they needed allies. Selene nodded and pointed to a small holomap. It showed hidden bases and smuggler routes. She had prepared contacts on several frontier worlds. John studied the map. He saw 3 planets marked with red symbols. Selene said these were safe havens where they could rest and resupply. She asked, which he preferred. John thought of his friends on Mars and a minor family on Astro 9. He chose Astro 9. Selene smiled and set a course. During the trip, John and Selene worked side by side. John calibrated the shuttle's shields and weapons. Selene tuned the engines to balance speed and stealth. They moved in silence at times, each lost in thought. John pressed his hand to the stone in his pocket. Selene watched him and reached for his hand. He squeezed hers and smiled. After hours, the shuttle slowed. Astro 9 appeared on the screen. It was a desert world with red sands and rocky canyons. Small lights dotted the surface. Selene guided the shuttle to a hidden landing pad under a canyon ridge. John looked out and saw a small outpost built into the rock. John and Selene exhaled. The shuttle, the desert air felt dry and hot. They locked the shuttle's door and carried the secure container inside. The outpost's walls were made from metal plates and stone blocks. A neon sign read, "Volf's Rest." A dog barked nearby. Inside, John's old friend Maya greeted them. She had dark skin and bright eyes. She ran a small trading post. John hugged her. Maya asked what had brought him to Astro 9. Selene stood behind him, quiet and graceful. John said they needed help and food. Maya nodded and led them to a back room. She offered water and fresh bread. John and Selene sat at a table. John opened the secure container. Maya gasped at the glowing crystal fragment. John explained its power and purpose. Maya's eyes shone with wonder. Maya said she knew someone at the Galactic Council who could help transport the seeds of the crystal to Earth. John thanked her. Maya tapped numbers on a holopad. She sent a secure message. They waited in silence. Selene studied the walls. She traced the carved patterns with her fingers. She said the designs reminded her of her home's sacred halls. John watched her, curious. She smiled and said the stone in his pocket had helped her find him again. John looked at the stone. He said he did not understand its power completely. Selene said it was a piece of her world, a link between them. She said it would guide him when he needed it most. John nodded. Maya returned. She said the council had approved a transport team. They would arrive in 20 hours. John felt relief. Selene said they had time to rest and plan. John agreed. That night, John slept on a cot in the back room. Selene stayed by the table, watching the crystal fragment. John dreamed of Earth's blue skies and green forests. He dreamed of people smiling. He woke to hear Selene whispering in her language. She turned to him and smiled. John asked what she was saying. Selene said she was offering thanks again. John laughed softly. Selene stood and stretched. She said she wanted to walk under the alien stars. John joined her outside. They stepped into the desert night. The sky was filled with 2 moons and a million stars. The sand glowed faintly under their feet. Selene took John's hand. They walked in silence. After a while, Selene stopped and pointed to the sky. A meteor shower streaked above. John watched as bright trails flashed across the cosmos. He felt small and alive. Selene turned to John. She said she had taught him to trust and hope. She said she believed humanity could change. John looked at her and said he believed the same. They kissed under the alien sky. John felt love and promise. He held Selene close. They returned to Volf's Rest before dawn. The shuttle's sensors chimed. A small vessel spun into orbit. John looked at Selene. She nodded. Their allies had arrived. John opened his eyes to a soft glow from the console. Selene sat opposite him, reviewing holocharts. He rubbed his neck and stood. They had just jumped out of hyperspace near Earth's orbit. John felt a mix of relief and anxiety. He reached for the container with the crystal seeds. It lay secure in his lap. The shuttle's door opened. A small transport ship hovered nearby. John and Selene stepped onto the docking platform. The transport's pilot, a human woman named Clara, greeted them. Clara wore a council uniform and offered a respectful nod. John introduced Selene and explained the mission. Clara led them inside the transport. John felt the cabin's air smell of metal and cleaner. He placed the container on a central table. Clara tapped her console. A hologram of Earth appeared, marked with points of deployment. She said the council had approved 3 locations: a drought-stricken region in Africa, a war zone in the Middle East, and a polluted coast in Asia. John studied the points. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. Selene touched his arm and said she would guide him through each step. John nodded. Clara set a course. The transport lifted and moved toward the first point. Outside the window, blue marble rolled by. John watched silently. Selene placed her hand on his. He felt calm. They reached the African plains. Drought had hardened the land. Residents gathered near a cracked riverbed. John and Selene stepped out, carrying one crystal seed. Selene whispered guidance in her language. John raised the seed and placed it in the dry earth. The ground trembled. A soft light spilled upward. Plants sprouted, green and lush. Water flowed in new streams. The onlookers gasped and cheered. John felt tears in his eyes. He looked at Selene. She smiled. John realized they had done something incredible. They returned to the transport. Clara recorded the event. John and Selene prepared for the next point. In the Middle East, villages lay in ruin from conflict. John felt sorrow as he walked through. Broken walls. Selene spoke words of peace in her voice. John placed another seed in the dust. Within moments, buildings grew repair vines that mended walls. Clean water gushed from new springs. Villagers emerged, astonished. John saw children laugh and families embrace. He felt hope. The transport lifted again, taking them to Asia's coast. Factories lined the shore, belching smoke into the sky. John held the last seed. He thought of Earth's pain. He placed the seed near the polluted water. The seed's light grew and spread. Water cleared, fish returned, air purified. Factory workers stepped outside, tears in their eyes. They watched clean rivers flow. John felt relief and pride. They returned to orbit. Clara closed her holorecord. She said the council would share the seed's effects with the world. John and Selene sat side by side. John took her hand. Selene said she was proud of him. John said he could not have done it without her. She smiled and kissed him. John thought of the journey, from that first rescue to this moment. He felt gratitude. For Selene's gift and trust, Selene said it was time to return home. She led John back to the shuttle. They prepared for jump. John held the empty container. He thought of the crystal's power. He knew their work was not done. There were more people who needed healing. As they slipped into hyperspace, John looked at Selene. He said he wanted to share her story with humanity. She nodded and said they would bring more seeds as needed. John felt a sense of purpose. He squeezed Selene's hand. She rested her head on his shoulder. The stars blurred outside. John closed his eyes and dreamt of Earth's future: green forest, blue rivers, and peace among nations. He smiled. He whispered, "Thank you, Selene." She replied, "And thank you, John." Hyperspace carried them onward, toward new challenges and hope for both worlds. When the shuttle dropped out of hyperspace, John felt the familiar hum beneath his feet. He opened his eyes to the view screen. A violet star glowed on the horizon. Selene sat beside him, her hand resting on his. They had returned to her world. John rubbed his temples. Their journey had been long and hard. He thought of Earth and the seeds they had planted. He wondered how people there would react. He turned to Selene. She offered a small smile and said she was glad he was home. The shuttle's engine slowed and the craft settled into orbit. Selene tapped a button on the console. The airlock hissed open. John followed Selene through the narrow corridor and out onto the landing platform. The pale wind of her world whispered against his skin. Below them lay the valley they had first seen. The crystal towers shone brighter now, pulsing with the life of the seeds spreading across distant lands. Rivers glowed where they flowed, and forests of silver-leaf trees grew on distant hills. John stood at the edge of the platform and looked out. He felt a sense of awe and peace. Selene joined him, her hair floating around her like liquid moonlight. She spoke softly, explaining changes he could not yet see. She said the seeds had taken root in many places. Not only on Earth, her own world had shared their gift with other allies. She told him the crystal's power spread through connections of hope and trust, not by force or fear. John listened, feeling hope bloom in his chest. He looked at Celine. She said John had proven himself worthy of the crystal's trust. She placed her hand over his heart. He felt warmth spread through him. Celine led John down a path carved into pale stone. They walked beside a crystal river that sang as it flowed. She told him stories of the first days when her people learned to use the crystal to heal and to unite. John asked Celine if he would ever return to Earth. She stopped and turned to him. She said he could come whenever he wished. She also said he had a new role, ambassador of crystal and of hope. John's breath caught. She guided him to a council hall carved from amethyst. Inside, figures and flowing robes waited. They stood as John and Celine entered. John felt nervous. He had never spoken before such a group on her world. Celine introduced John. She said he had saved her life and helped heal 2 worlds, the council murmured. They welcomed John and invited him to speak. John stepped forward. He felt the crystal stone in his pocket. He took a deep breath. He spoke in simple words. He told them about Earth's struggles and its people's hopes. He spoke of the seeds and of the joy they brought. He said they needed guidance to use the crystal wisely. The council listened. When he finished, Celine stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. She motioned to the crystal shard he held. She said the shard should remain on her world as a symbol of unity, but its seeds would travel. The council agreed. They declared a new alliance between her people and humanity. John felt tears of pride. Celine smiled at him. After the ceremony, Celine and John walked through crystal halls lit by gentle light. Guards bowed as they passed. Celine told John that they would build an embassy on Earth, where both worlds would share knowledge. John thought of his workshop on the station. He dreamed of turning it into a place where crystal seeds and human inventions would meet. He felt excitement. That evening, John and Celine sat by the river. Violet fish swam around glowing stones. Celine brought fruit that tasted like morning dew. John tasted it and smiled. Celine spoke of dreams she had for their future. She wanted to travel beyond known space with him. John took her hand and said he would go anywhere with her. They leaned together and watched the moons rise. John felt peace and love. When dawn came, Celine guided John to a small garden. She handed him a pouch filled with new crystal seeds. She said these were for his people to plant in forests and fields. John promised to use them wisely. He promised to protect the gift and the trust it represented. Celine pressed the pouch into his hands. She said the seeds would guide him back home whenever he wished, and the stone would light his path. John felt the weight of responsibility but also joy. He looked at Celine. She was his friend, his partner, his love. They embraced under the violet sky. Later, John prepared the shuttle for departure. Celine loaded supplies and gifts, crystals, data pads with history, and seeds for the council's next shipments. John climbed into the pilot's seat. Celine sat beside him. He started the engines. The shuttle lifted and moved toward the stars. John felt a thrill of purpose. As they approached the exit to hyperspace, John looked at Celine and said he was ready. Celine placed her hand on the console. She whispered in her language, and the shuttle jumped into hyperspace. John closed his eyes, holding Celine's hand. He thought of Earth turning below, of people waiting for hope. The stars blurred outside. John whispered softly, "Together." Celine whispered back, "Together." The shuttle carried them home.